So what mindsets do you need to come up with creative ideas and technology? Well, one is understanding how you think, meaning there's speed and there's depth of thinking. Your conscious processing is when you really think through issues. The problem with this is it's slow. And so your automated processing is, when ideas just pop into your head. But typically, automated processing is a byproduct of training. And so what creativity actually really is you take one idea, you take a second idea, and you put them together. Every piece of technology that's considered to be groundbreaking, it's just one idea and another idea put together. When we can combine the automatic and conscious, that's when we come up with our ideas for innovation. But you have to free your mind to do that. And so understand what are the best situations to put you in to keep your mind uncluttered so you can focus. There are three perspectives, three mindsets that you need in order to be a progressive innovator. One is you need the writer's focus. Now, what the writer's focus means is that when you write something, the difference between professional writers and amateur writers or the professional writers, there's a purpose for every word. Did you think through all the details? One thing about my designs is when I used to go to design reviews, they would try to trip me up and they said, why is this 7 microns thick? Why is this corner curved instead of straight? Why didn't you make a diagonal line instead of an elbow? There has to be a reason for everything. And guys like Bill Gates, Bezos, all of these people have a writer's focus. Do you have an economist mindset? Meaning you can't rely on the past. You have to look at things from this point moving forward. What should you do? For example, you put $30,000 into trying to fix up an old car, and it's going to cost you $15,000 to get it finished. On the other hand, you need a car right now to get to work. It'll only cost you $10,000, but most people would pay the $15,000 because they think, well, I've got $30,000 in it. If you can't recover the cost, it's referred to as sunk cost. And so you have to look at this from this point forward, not what you've done in the past. And that's what a lot of people do. And they come up with unoptimized decisions. Do you have an architect's focus? Things don't exist in one level. They exist in multiple levels and multiple planes. For example, a window sits in a steeple that sits on top of a building that sits in a neighborhood. This is what architects do. They see from the smallest detail all the way out to the larger picture. Can you do the same things? Do you understand what lies next? So Henry Ford's vision is he wanted every American to own a car. And so what did he do? This is how the average car builder looked at selling cars. You need parts. You need to find a way to manufacture it. And if I build it, people will come. And what Henry Ford realized is that the price of cars needed to be low. However, if you want to see opportunity, go bigger or go smaller. What's the next logical step? The price is $525, but the average income for people was only $1,400 a year. So that's a big chunk of change to basically use like 40% of your salary just to buy a car. And so Henry Ford did not believe in debt. Henry Ford believed that debt was a sin. On the other hand, Alfred P. Sloan, GM of General Motors, he came up with the idea of financing. And it's just like your cell phones and everything else. If you had to pay for it up front, you probably couldn't afford it. But because it's monthly, you can. Examples of focusing include, let's go out bigger. When cars started, it was made by Carl Benz and Ransom Olds. And believe it or not, that little car there cost tens of thousands of dollars. And then Ford, go bigger. Ford came up with the assembly line. What Ford saw was a slaughterhouse. In a slaughterhouse, he saw pigs coming off the line, and he thought, wow, I can apply this to cars. And that's how he came up with the idea with the assembly line. Again, one idea, another idea. Sloan basically saw all the flaws in Ford, including that Henry Ford said you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And so Sloan came up with color and price classes and lending. And subsequently, GM passed Ford as America's biggest car company. Now, besides going bigger, you can always go smaller. And is there a detail that they left out? For example, the windshield wiper in the 1920s was created by a woman named Mary Anderson. Believe it or not, a woman back then invented it. And you could see what happened. She was probably running along in a car when there's bad weather. And she just said, man, you can't see crap out of this. Wouldn't it be great if you had something that could wipe it away? Wouldn't it be great if it was intermittent? And so Mary Anderson went smaller. She found the windshield wiper. The thing about these guys, are they all geniuses? Is that why they made it and nobody else did? Well, they're all very smart individuals. However, what they saw more than anything else is how everything connects. Quite frankly, I think Gates is a genius. Gates is amazing. Jobs always had things in proper perspective. Bezos, I don't think he's a particularly insightful or smart guy, but what he is a very pragmatic man, and that's why he's been so successful. So what are the keys to focusing? You have to understand value chains. Basically, what is the process? What is the value that it's offering? And do you understand the nature of things? Meaning, do you understand the nature of the game that you're playing? And so here's an example of a value chain. Neonatal care. Basically, premature babies. What is the process? It starts with registering them, giving them a bed. You have to obtain the milk from the mother. These tiny babies get 7 feedings per day. You send up an infusion pump in order to do this. The problem is you need very, very small tubing to put into a neonate. And that creates a lot of back pressure and a lot of stress on the motor. But you need very high precision, and so there's a trade-off there. And you probably have multiple lines, because besides nutrition, the babies probably can have illnesses or whatever, so you're going to need drugs. And based on this approach, my company, Abbott Labs, came with their solution was the 12-pound pump that would cost $5,000. I came up with the idea of a pump the size of a cell phone. And as you could see, you could put a lot of these. Not only that, it would be a lot cheaper. And the way I did that is this thing has over 1,000 parts. This would have about 5. I was making digital watches that were making Rolexes. Unfortunately, I got shot down, and that's a much longer story. But what this also had is it was a solution, meaning it had a barcode reader. So all these different drugs and different mother's milk and stuff like that, you can measure it when it comes in. It's lighter, so you could put more on a pole. For those of you who ever had to move around an IV pole, a little bit of weight, and that thing gets very tippy in a hurry. And just convenient to use. Now, Southwest Airlines. How did they come up with their idea? By the way, Herb Kelleher is one of my all-time favorite CEOs. This was a man, United was making $26 million a year and not making a profit. Herb Kelleher was paying himself $400,000 a year. And he said, no, that's enough to live on. And he had like 1/3 the stock the United guy was giving himself. He said, no, I got plenty of stock. I don't want to take it out of my company. totally different attitudes. What Herb Kelleher realizes, okay, so what's profit? It's revenue minus cost. So airlines are hard to make profitable. So you got to boost this and reduce this. And what he came up with is revenue is the number of flights you can have times the number of passengers. The number of flights is how many of these flights can you squeeze into the flight time in one day. And he found out that the flight time was a function of the gate turnaround. Now, a typical airline turns around the gate in 1.5 hours. And Herb Kelleher came up with an approach where he could turn the gate in a half hour. All of a sudden, that extra time, he could have more flights. Not only that, a very big part of planes are maintenance. And somebody like United has like 12 different planes they have to maintain. All those spare parts and everything, very expensive. So this is why Southwest only has one airplane. Even when one airplane's in maintenance, if another one breaks down, you can cannibalize that for parts. What Herb Kelleher did, though, is he came up with a total solution. He was competing on more than one dimension. When you look at your value chains, look at the points that are worth the most, the points that have the most pain, and look at what the values are and where I can use technology innovation to make it different. Now, when you look at a topic, think like an economist. And what do economists do? They look at data and try to understand why something is happening. What you're trying to do is figure out what is its story. And this is part of the reason why I teach a storytelling class. You need to understand the underlying nature. What's the issue? What mechanism drives it? And what factors are critical? And this may require you to do some research. An example of underlying nature is tug of war. Okay, I was at a company picnic and they decided to have a tug of war. And what happens is the old overweight managers formed one team, and the young engineers, these are the guys who at lunchtime go to the gym or play soccer, formed the other team. And then the old fat managers said, Steve, you're going to be captain of our team. And I'm like, oh my God, we're in trouble. We're going to get embarrassed. Okay, once you get over your fear and everything else, I started thinking about, okay, what wins in tug of war? It's force. Force is a function of the weight that you have on your side and the strength. The thing is, there's no way we could win on strength. The weights were balanced. However, strength is not a function of just muscle. It's also a function of traction. How much traction do you have with the ground? And so one thing I noticed is that the soccer players and all were putting on their cleats. They thought they were going to get an advantage. But they told me, Steve, you can pick the place where we're going to have this tug of war. And what did I do? I walked all around the campground and I found an area where it was hard clay. They could not dig their cleats into it. As a matter of fact, they were at a disadvantage because they have less surface area contact with the ground than we did. And then what I told the team to do is dig. We dug trenches. And so we started out pulling with our feet in the trenches. What we would do is lean back, and then I would yell to everybody, step. And then everybody would step over into the next trench. And then we pull, step. And we slowly pulled them across and ended up winning. And it's all because I understood the nature of what we were doing, that there was a way to win. When you do your problem solving, are your objectives SMART, meaning specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely? Meaning they have to be an achievable kind of objective, not something like do your best. How far do you have to go with this? Because that's going to go into your planning. And what variables do you have to deal with? You have to make goals manageable. You can't have a 12-month goal. You have no idea how you're going to do. But you can handle 12 one-month goals. And then finally, you have to be unbiased. You have to have a sunk point of view. You can't worry about the past. And so, how do I get my product ideas from technology? And so, when we look at technology, it starts as an invention. And then invention gets turned into a technology. And that technology is used for an innovation, which makes products and services. An example is the integrated circuit. The integrated circuit was the foundation for logic, memory, sensing, communication. You can take these elements and start making portable instruments or computers or increase performance. And so all of these subsequently go into different products and services. That's how technology evolves. Remember, there's only 4 kinds of technologies. Electrical is about brains and senses. Mechanical is about body and movement. Chemical is about reactors. And software is about decisions and information. When you have an idea for something, where should you look? If you have a specific technology and you have a solution that's looking for a problem, then look at these elements. Push and pull means, push means you could just put it out in the market. You don't really have to target or anything. Food, cures to disease, these are things you just push out there. Pull is what the market is always looking for. What's trending, or what types of technology are you looking at? I'm interested in a specific business like Walmart. What you have to do is look at their products, look at their market, or look at their operations. Look at those value chains to find opportunity. The next is there's a market of interest, like I want to go into solar or EV cars. You have to look for new markets, pain, niche, or gaps, differentiation. And if you're looking for context, you want to change the world, then you have to look at technology, international issues, and society. Again, the discipline you need are architects, writers, and economists to be successful at this. This is just a summary of what I talked about and examples of what each and every one of these things are. Now, typically, ideas come from bottoms up or top down. If it's top down, you're a solution looking for a problem. So you're going to be looking for this. On the other hand, if you're a problem looking for a solution, which is bottoms up, then as you can see, the more bottoms up you're looking at these issues. Take some businesses that show no end in sight. So these are push solutions. Data. Get it? Data? All right. Anyway, it's always growing. It's never going to stop. There's always going to be a need for it. The world is a complex place with more and more technology. People are always looking for solutions. So, services business, they don't want to do it. They want an expert to do it. That's you. Security, it's a game. They break security, we fix security. They break security, we fix security. It's something that never ends. Food, air, and water we need, and healthcare, quality of life in particular. The thing is, the timing in tech push, many product ideas aren't new. They've been thought of before. There's a window, though. But when is a product before its time? And here are some examples. I'm not going to go through all of them. But for example, the Nintendo Power Glove. Nintendo just put all these things on a glove, but it was too cumbersome and everything else. So they had to wait until the microsensors came out. And that started the Wii and subsequently every gaming system after that. The Palm Treo was actually the first smartphone. And it had all the things that the first iPhone had, including browser and everything else. And yet, it wasn't successful. And 5 years later, the iPhone came out. What happened in between that? Well, as it turns out, people weren't ready to look at a phone as a computing device. And so you needed an intermediary step. And what was that intermediary step? The BlackBerry. And subsequently, the BlackBerry got wiped out by the iPhone. And one interesting thing is Microsoft Spotwatch. They actually had the first smartwatch in 2004. The problem is it ran off of a phone line. And as you can see, that's not a lot of data. And so there wasn't a lot you could do with it. And so subsequently, it failed. You have to deliver what you say you're going to deliver. And so infrastructure is a very big deal. And the infrastructure we're looking for here always needs to be better. We're always looking for better displays. The displays are out there right now or still have a resolution 200 times less than your eyes. That's how good your eyes are. Batteries, bandwidth, speed, and content. And here's just some trending markets for you to look over. You're probably already familiar with these. And networks and platforms. The thing about platforms is the power of it is n squared. And this is why getting users is so critical. But what you're trying to do is get to critical mass so it runs by itself and you don't have to do a lot. The thing is, what is tech impact? How scalable are goods? Do you have improvement? Can they be customizable? Meaning you're talking about economies of scope. From one tool, you can get a lot of different things. Disintermediation, you're trying to remove the middleman, and decentralization, which works well for networks and platforms. Here's an example of a tech framework. Supposing I have a new metal that has super low resistance. Well, what's trending right now? Power, batteries. What needs fast charging? Now, there was actually a group at the University of Illinois that was doing this, and they wanted to go after cell phones. Here's the problem. You plug your cell phone in for 15 minutes and you get like 50% of the charge back. I mean, the fast chargers right now, the wait time for batteries really isn't that big a deal. But what's a big deal for batteries right now is the electric car. And I told them they were going after the wrong application, and then they just gave me dirty looks. What's in high demand? A lack of infrastructure, and it impacts your utility. Here are some topics, trends, and pull examples of other things you look at when you have a new technology. Where are places I can look for this stuff? Talk to expert, blogs, news, trade articles, or a university. Yeah, we got a lot of experts around here. Ask their opinions. Okay, here's a little video for a break, and it's about Cliff Booth, who is a character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And what it shows is somebody who's trained and somebody who has experience. One thing I tell people is you're either street or you're book. And one is not necessarily better than the other. Approach number 2, markets. What are the values? We all remember what the 3 are. The question is, it's significant. In terms of markets, what you're looking for is gaps, or they're overlooked industries. And typically, there's a gap there because there's something preventing from people going in there. And one is regulation. Actually, the original business model of Enron was to deregulate industries, and because it's their lobbyists in there, they would be the first ones into the market. It was actually a really good business model until they got greedy. Niches, and that's that you take a market that already exists and you find a specialty group and cut it out. However, it means you're going to have a smaller market. Pain, there's unmet need. And finally, differentiation, where you invented something that nobody's ever seen before. Remember, how do I make a feasible idea? What I offer is exceptional. What do you stand out in? Are you the price leader, the product leader, or customer intimacy? Which of those things do you excel at? Can you make a sustainable profit? And finally, are you difficult to copy? The market framework, for example, real estate. And the thing is, real estate has middlemen, the realtors. In this digital age, why do you need the middleman? And that's that you can create digital forms. You don't need to pay that 6% out, which is a big chunk of change. For example, if you sell a $500,000 house, that realtor is getting paid $30,000. And how many hours do they really put into this? That's why real estate is so lucrative and so many people get into it. In terms of business offerings, are you about the product? Are you about the market? Or are you about operations? These are the things where you look to innovate an existing business. For example, the we added sensors. Amazon. What Bezos understood is he realized with this internet thing, wow, it's really easy to go through a lot of information. And so he started thinking about, well, what things are in catalogs? And then he thought about the limitation of books. And Sears, well, it didn't help him because, yeah, you could do all this research and all and models and stuff like that. But if your store is dirty and crappy, that has to count most. And so, but there were one of the big proponents of big data. The thing is, your value chains, they could be transactional, they could be specific, or they could be operational. An example is Warby Parker. Now, Warby Parker makes lenses and frames, but for those of you who wear glasses, and I do, there's something in the middle. You have to go get an eye exam, and that's inconvenient. So what Warby Parker's been working on for quite a long time is, can they come up with a computer eye exam? And you think it would be feasible, like you sit a certain way, and for those of you who have been through it, it's like, is this clear or this is clear? There should be a way to do it. Software as a service, another example. Context. If I'm looking at technology, markets, are they being deregulated, supply chain, globalization, or societal issues? Does disruption always work? No, because you can disrupt a market, but if the volume isn't there, then you're not going to make it. For example, Medtronic makes $50 million a year on epilepsy sensors. Well, the problem is that, and they're like $10,000 a piece. Well, I looked at that technology and I said, I could build that for 100. Here's the problem. At $100 and only 40,000 people, and not all of them are going to want implants, all of a sudden, that's not enough money to make a business, especially with all the overhead. And there's also globalization to look at. Something may not be popular here in the United States, but it might be popular in places like China or India. Politics, for example. Trump won by spending a lot less money than the Democrats. And the way he did it is digitally. So now the big thing for politicians is to have digital marketing firms do their work for them. In terms of investment, what do you care about? The market size? How much money can I make? Who are you going to compete against? What are the barriers? How long is it going to get you to break even? This is critical, and you should know this at the start. When are you going to break even? Why? Because investors want their money back. The worst thing is when people say, I don't know, we're doing our best. That doesn't make you feel very confident for somebody who took my money. How much you think this business could be acquired for, and what's the risk in return? And everything regarding all of this is industry dependent. So what do I want to focus on? What am I? Am I the car, meaning am I the technology? Am I the driver, customer intimacy? It's all about me, or the race is what markets I'm going in. And so, do I fulfill the crux of entrepreneurship? And for example, I like sustainable energy. I'm interested in solar technology. And you can see what areas these fall into. Just by understanding what it is you're interested in, you know what to look at and what you should be looking at. An example is one person wanted to make a smart soccer ball. He wanted to put sensors on it. And his problem actually was a lot of it had to do with the marketing. Another gal, her dad worked in machine shops. And in machine shops, well, I shouldn't say machine shops, I should say auto body shops. they waste a lot of time and cost talking to you. So if you have kiosks, a lot of this can remove the middleman and save them money. In terms of bottoms up, context, decentralization, deregulation, and are there issues going on in the world, like guns, is a big deal, and everything else going on in our age. I'm not going to get into it. But in technology, what am I good at? What example? And what is the context? People aren't happy with education. Now, what it is about in education is, on one hand, you want intimacy. On the other hand, does it have the content that you want? And so homeschooling can lessen content because the parents aren't teachers. And on the other hand, you have great intimacy, though. And so what if you can come up with VR teachers? All of a sudden, you can create a new kind of business. Farming. What types of farming are there? What are the challenges and what are the issues? How are we going to feed all these people? I'm not going to go through this to save time because I think it's self-explanatory, but these are the challenges in farming, and this is what you have to look at. For example, one of my students actually came from a farm family, and he didn't want to go back to the farm. So he convinced his dad to buy a robot, and his dad said, "This was the smartest decision I ever made. Robots show up on time. Robots work 24 hours. Robots don't complain. Robots don't slack off." And so all of a sudden, automation is a very big deal. Your assignments. You need to go out and talk to people about your idea. And so these are the types of people you talk to. People could be customers. People could be investors. You're talking to more than one person. The thing about networking is you need to answer questions about your 3 pillars. Can you validate it? Can somebody tell you what you're doing is right? And can you find people who share your vision and will be a help? Now, the networking process, they used to say, go talk to 100 people. And without a strategy, it's just a waste of time because all people do is come up with a list of 100 people. They check all the boxes and say, hey, I talked to 100 people. You're not interested in the number of people you talk to. You're interested in what answers you come up with. The thing about networks is when you form a connection with someone else, their network adds to your network. All of a sudden, this is how you get spread. This is how viral works. It's not 2 people who tell 2 people. What you're trying to find are gushers, and those are people who know other people, and they get you. They're networked into the industry, and they want to help you. And so you need to sit down and think about, what are my objectives? What am I trying to prove first? And then, what questions am I going to ask and who am I going to talk to? And an example is, what if I want to come up with an app that connects you to a hair cutter? And so, for example, your first question is, you might talk to the hair cutters themselves. The thing is, it's a 2-sided market. You need somebody who needs a haircut and somebody who can provide cutting the hair. And so you might ask them, what's your first impression of the idea? And so these are the kind of people you're talk to. The thing is, interviews are conversations. Don't make it like an interrogation. You still need to know what the background is. What is it you're going to target? How are you going to find these people? The thing is, alumni networks work well. Never end a conversation unless you ask for help. Meaning, when you end a conversation, say, excuse me, if you don't mind my asking, is there somebody else you think I should be talking to? Or if you had a good conversation, not put it that way, but put it, do you think there's somebody who can further get me along in my process? Take meetings, have conversations. The thing is, this is very time consuming. And if it looks like a long-term relationship, be sure you follow up. A network only works when you are active. And so, what are you interested in? Are you looking top up, top down? You have to think about, can I make money, use research, look at the frameworks, and pick what kind of idea do I actually have.